Joe, wanted to kick off our conversation today with a quick background and discussion. Can you kind of share with us from your perspective, what is ESG?
If we really cut to the chase, it's about driving good development. So that means responsible, sustainable, ethical development that really gives back to society and protects the environment. And we've noticed that this has really accelerated in the UK in recent years, particularly since COP26 last year. And we are seeing the focus on the three different strands of ESG. So, E being environment, covering everything from environmental impacts such as energy use, materials, water, waste. The S being social, and that's really looking at the impact of development on communities, employees, customers, supply chain, and covering topics spanning health and well-being, safety, tackling inequalities, looking at employment and skills development opportunities, and then finally, the G, which is about governance. And this is about corporate leadership and decision making, and about ethical and transparent working practices, and having really robust internal processes and controls. And it's really about going from that single view of profit to thinking about triple bottom line reporting, so planet and people alongside profit.
So really a broad and holistic approach to kind of how you're thinking about, what is good business? What does it mean for communities? Um, let's bring the conversation a little bit to, the built environment. So give us your thoughts on kind of what does ESG mean to the real estate and built environment.
So I'd say that business leaders and investors across all industries are increasingly acknowledging that they have a really important role to play in tackling environmental social problems and addressing the sustainable development challenge. But it is particularly the case in the real estate sector. So if we think about the purpose of the built environment, which is fundamentally to enable people and society to flourish, and as providers and stewards of the built environment, and such a big sector in any economy, and one that is responsible for a huge amount of environmental impact, the real estate industry clearly has a really huge role to play in creating social value and protecting the environment. One of the stats that we hear quite commonly is around the environmental impact of the built environment and being responsible for 40% of carbon emissions and half of materials consumption and half of waste generated. So it's really significant, and we're seeing the sector step up to the challenge.
That's great to hear, Joe. And I know with real estate having such an important role, and you mentioned climate change, um, would like to get a little bit of an understanding on in the UK specifically. How are the policymakers and in the leadership in the UK government? How are they really helping to drive ESG in this space?
So I would say that our UK government has been providing fantastic leadership on this agenda. So we were the first country to set legally binding climate change targets, a huge amount of investment in green electricity. We're seeing policies around environmental protection and circular economy really driving action. But also at the local government level. So we're seeing local governments becoming much more stringent in their planning conditions and their planning policy. So all new development now has to adhere to much more stringent planning conditions around sustainability. So we've had that government leadership, but actually what we're seeing is the private sector starting to take ESG much more seriously without the government driver. They're doing it because it makes business sense, and because I think they'll get left behind if they don't. So there's a really strong business imperative to do that. So we're starting to see companies across the real estate sort of ecosystem, from investors through to designers and engineers, the contractors, and then the long-term asset managers, really step up on corporate sustainability strategies, setting themselves net zero carbon targets. They've got social value strategies and targets, and it's becoming part of brand image and actually attraction and retention of staff as well.
Well, that's a great perspective, and I share your optimism that I really see here, even in the U.S., that businesses are actually taking the mantle and the leadership role here. It's great that the government policies are kind of helping incentivize, some of these actions, but it's also great to see that businesses have more agility, the ability to move faster. It's great to see the actions being implemented and in those next steps. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about from an investor focus. How can investors? What are they looking for? What does an investor see in the real estate market related to the value of ESG?
So I would start by saying here that the UK market is really open to international investment. But I think that what international investors need to know is that we are really ambitious here in terms of what we want to achieve. And planning is getting stricter. There's likely to be carbon taxes. There is a real strong desire for all new development to really give back to local communities and contribute to our levelling up agenda, as the government terms it over here, which is all about tackling inequalities. So there's quite a lot of expectation. But I think that investors have such an incredible opportunity to influence the direction of new development and to really ensure that they're taking a really ambitious sort of ESG approach, but also that they're future proofing the assets. And so what we've seen here in the UK is several sort of stranded assets, particularly in light of COVID-19. We have been left with lots of buildings that are now not fit for purpose and are going to be repurposed into new types of different asset classes. And it's an opportunity just to take stock of where we're at and think about how that real estate investment can be fit for the future and deliver on those environmental and social ambitions. I'd also say actually that what we're seeing over here in the UK is a shift towards value-based decision making. And we have a new toolkit, it's called the Value Toolkit, and it's been developed by the Construction Innovation Hub. And this is a government-backed initiative to really change the way that real estate thinks about and measures value. And we are definitely seeing this trend towards real estate sector using a much wider range of non-financial measures, including the environmental and social, to really assess the true value of that real estate. So getting that value proposition set out will help you get stakeholder buy-in, it will help you get through planning quicker, and ultimately have a more successful building that will get you a better return on investment in the long run.
That's great, Joe. I love the this toolkit that you mentioned, being able to measure social value, you know, natural value as well as the financial value. Bringing those all together is really what's it's going to move us forward. So, thank you for your time today. Fantastic insights into what's happening in the UK.
Thank you, Kris.